Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We're talking about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. I'm here today, and I'm glad to say that our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore, is back with us. How's it going, Bill?
Very well, thank you. I flew home from Seattle late last night, safely in a Boeing aircraft. So we're going to talk a little bit about that.
All right, great. Well, we've got a few things to cover today. We're going to cover Virginia abandoning the California mandates,
Mhm.
Cadillac reversing course on their EV expectations, Boeing stealing trade secrets. Let's see here. The U.S. Oh, we're going to skip that one today. The cost of why it's so expensive to repair an EV. Are electric cars better for the environment? And
Yeah,
we've
that's a
got
good
both an
one.
Australian take and a U.S. take on that today.
Yeah.
And how BYD is destroying one of the big EV makers in one of the other countries.
Yeah.
So anyways, we're going to start out talking about what's going on in Virginia. So Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia has announced that starting in 2025, Virginia will no longer adhere to California's stringent emission standards, will now follow the less restrictive federal rules. They had 13 states had been adopting the California standards,
hmm
right?
Yep.
And Republican Governor Youngkin cited a legal opinion from the state attorney general stating that Virginia is not required to comply with the updated standards. Well, of course they're not. They're not California. But these standards set escalating thresholds for new zero-emission vehicle sales, beginning at 35% in 2026 and reaching 100% by 2035. Well, you know, I'm one who's not real big on mandates, but I look at how EVs are going, and it really seems hard to believe that by 2035 they wouldn't hit 100% anyways.
Yeah, particularly, yeah, since what I think was the last quarter, something like, or was it last year, 25% of the new cars sold in California were plug-in of one form or another, whether it's a
Right.
HEV or it's a pure battery electric. So yeah,
Yeah.
California's
So
on a roll.
we've seen pretty consistent from different countries. When you hit a certain percentage, it seems to just keep
hmm
going on the scale. And if we look at what other countries have done, basically by about 2020 or 2033, 2034,
Yeah.
we should be about 90% across the whole country.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
kind of wonder now. I'm going to give you I spent the last week in Seattle. Okay,
Mhm.
actually not far from the Boeing plant. And the one thing that you notice out there, and I guess we'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, is the fact that you can't throw, proverbially, you can't throw a dead cat anywhere in that part of the city up north around Everett and Mill Creek and Bothell and Linwood. You can't throw a dead cat without hitting a Prius. I mean, it is just an example. We came back as we were coming back yesterday. There's a bridge that crosses, I think it's 128th Street or something like that. And on that bridge that crosses I-5, the main north-south artery through the West Coast, and crossing that bridge, there were in a row 3 Teslas. And everywhere you drive out there, you see Teslas, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the numbers and things. So I almost wonder if that isn't the result of a I don't know, the neighbor has one, I need one effect, or
It
what,
is.
right?
I've
Because
seen a lot of talk of that. Is that people will start adopting EVs once their neighbors start
yep,
driving them and they start realizing that it's not such a evil thing, and
yeah,
it's just a different drivetrain.
what have you lost? Case in point, and I didn't pursue this with him. I guess I wish I would have. But we went to a show in Seattle. One of the reasons we went out this time of year was to see the Stephanie Miller Sexy Liberal show. And we sat down in the row that was assigned to us, and then next to us, a gentleman and his wife and I guess sister-in-law and brother-in-law, sat down, and they were from Yakima,
Okay.
which of course is famous for apples and increasingly grapes and things like that. And he told me somehow or another well, I don't know how the EV part came up, but he said they own a Ford Mustang Mach-E. So I'm wondering, did they drive the Mach-E from Yakima across the pass, through the Cascades over to downtown Seattle? Did they, I wish I didn't think to ask him. Did they do that? Which would mean that you just aren't restricted in a state as wide open and mountainous and twisting terrain and, fast interstates. You aren't restricted. There's a Mustang Mach-E that did the trip, so maybe.
Well, they have decent range.
Confirm it, but
yeah, well, the Mach-E has good range.
280
or
something.
Oh, I was thinking it was higher than that. I was thinking it was closer to 300.
Oh,
it's not quite as good as the Teslas, but it's depends on which model you get.
Right.
Yeah. So you're seeing them everywhere.
Yeah. So is this if he's got one, I should if he can drive one, I guess I could drive one. There's got to be something. It'd be interesting. Some university, please do a study to find out why are all these like there in Seattle, why are all these people adopting these cars? Because it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. They're all over the place now.
Well, I always see people talking about the all of the incentives, the tax incentives and all that from the federal government. But in the places in the world and in the United States where EVs are being adopted the fastest tends to be where gas is the most expensive. And now Seattle's not as bad as California, but still it's much higher than here.
$4.37 a gallon because my daughter had to stop and fill up her Forester. So yeah, $4.37.
Yeah,
as of yesterday.
It's a buck higher than it is in Nebraska.
Yeah,
and I suspect electricity is more expensive there, but probably not by a lot. Washington State has a lot of hydro.
I don't. It's probably still cheaper than buying a gallon of gasoline.
Right. No, I get that.
So, yeah, and much of that, of course, is coming from renewable sources. You've got all the dams, that are providing, and increasingly, if you travel into the central part of the state, wind turbines everywhere. If you drive from like Seattle to Spokane or down to Yakima and the Tri-Cities area, they are everywhere. So they're getting a lot of their energy from renewables there in Seattle.
No, well, I get that. I get that. Well, let's see what we're doing here with this. If it gives much information on what's going on there between California and Virginia. 9% of vehicles sold in Virginia in 23 were electric. That's a little higher than the national average was about 7.8 or something like that for last year. Yeah.
And of course, that's the raison d'etre for the Attorney General to say, we don't have. I mean, I guess legally a point could be made about that, because what happened was in 2020 there was a Democratic governor, and I tried to get an answer on this idea, and AI that I'm using couldn't give me the answer because they didn't have access to that data at this point, at least, to try to find it. But it was a Democratic governor, and they decided as a state, and I'm assuming this is legislature, voted on, or the legislators voted on it. I don't know if it was a public forum, but it was, they brought it into effect. The older California standard that was originally written in 2004, called the Pavley Amendment. So that's what Virginia adopted in 2021 under a Democratic governor. So then California modified that amendment and came up with even tougher rules in 2022. So now the question is, should Virginia adopt that tougher standard that California did? And Youngkin says, no, we don't want to do that. We want to declare freedom from California. It's all a voluntary thing. It's not like the federal government is cramming this. Your legislature decided to follow that. Now they haven't. Didn't decide to follow the 2022 standard, which is fair. But Youngkin said, "No, we're not even going to do what was adopted in 2004."
Well, in that 2026 number, that 2026 goal for California is 35% of new car sales being EVs. Well, market conditions are going to make that happen in California for sure. Probably. They may even be at 40% by then.
Yeah.
Okay. But from 9% in Virginia, I think you're probably looking at more like 20% by 2026. Yeah. So it's not going to be as crazy as it's going in California, but it's still progress there, right?
Oh, absolutely. So you have a point can be made that we don't want to have legislation shoved down, but then again, our representatives voted on this.
Right. I get it.
So, they don't necessarily have to follow that, but what the market does really determines what happens. So whether they decide to go with the 2022 or whether they decide with the 2004, the market is going to eventually decide what happens. And as we're seeing, the adaptation, like I said, in Seattle, I mean, when I first went there, when our daughter moved there, it was like, 3-4 years ago, I was so excited when I went there the first time. I was counting Teslas. Wow, there's one. There's I was amazed. I was surprised, shocked, pleased. Now I don't even bother.
Yeah, I only count Cybertrucks now.
Yeah, I saw 3. I saw one in a parking lot in the Linwood Mall, and there's a story there. And then going to the airport, down to SeaTac yesterday on the 5, there was a car carrier going north on the 5, and on the top of the rack were two Cybertrucks. So I
probably being shipped to the Middle East.
Oh, I don't know what they were probably going. They're probably headed to the Tesla dealership in Linwood. So
yeah, I keep seeing people talking about brokering their Teslas they got their hands on and selling them overseas.
Oh, sure.
So yeah, but I've seen 3 so far around Omaha. I've seen one in Bellevue. Seen one.
Yeah.
I saw one on Dodge one day.
Yeah, I have a cousin that commented in YouTube that when I posted a photograph in Facebook of the Cybertruck, because we were just driving to go to lunch. There's a sushi place there that my daughter goes to, and we're driving past the parking garage, and oh my God, there's a Cybertruck, the first one I've seen. I said, stop. Says, no, Dad, I don't want to. Dad, please, come on, stop. So she pulls over and, and finally stops. And I run out, and she said, the reason she wouldn't stop, because she doesn't like Elon Musk.
Oh, that's funny.
I don't want to patronize him.
Well,
just
funny.
By stopping and letting her old man get out and take a photograph. So, yeah.
That's hilarious. Well, anyways, so we're going to go on to our next topic, and this is
please.
About Cadillac. So Cadillac, while they have the Lyric and the new, what is it? It's the Optique that's coming out. It's like $250,000.
Yes.
And they've got a Cadillac Escalade EV coming out that starts at about $180. They're reversing course on their 2030 EV only commitment.
Yeah.
And says they still need internal combustion engine cars. And so they're not switching entirely. Let's see what we've got here. It says not dead yet. The car maker hasn't said how long it expects to see internal combustion engines alongside its BEVs. I think you have higher adoption rates among younger people, and Cadillac tends to be a brand that caters to older folks.
Yeah.
Customer demand for internal combustion engines will keep them alive for a little longer. I think it's just a matter of time. I mean, that Cadillac Lyric, there's like 4 times as much demand for them as what they've been able to produce so far.
Apparently, they've been selling quite well. In fact, I actually saw one here in Omaha a couple of weeks ago.
I've seen a couple around Omaha, and it's, they're nice looking. Cadillac always does a nice job of making stuff look good, but high-ranking Cadillac and GM executives have previously said that 2030 would be the year that the brand would sell nothing but EVs. And they're going back on that across not just Cadillac, but it looks like all
Yeah,
of
you go over to
GM.
Europe, and most of them over in Europe are, they're all, then again, part of that is just, the economics, the cost of the thing, the reluctance of people to check what they think is not quite proven technology. We know all the reasons that people are hesitant, and that's a barrier for the car makers and policymakers to figure out how to overcome. And
Right.
maybe that'll take decades. I mean, basically, Mary Barra, said something to the effect that they are now realizing that this is going to be a decades long process.
Well, we've talked about before. It's like they were the ones. I thought the Volt was maybe out a little too soon. It was a little bit of a premature vehicle. GM was early into seeing that. And if they discontinued it in 2019, but if it was still going, it would be insanely popular right now.
Yeah.
I think it'd be an insanely popular vehicle. And so they're planning on bringing it back. And then the craziness of them getting rid of the Bolt. I mean, there must be a good reason, but they've never really given one. They keep thinking their other EVs are going to make up that space, and maybe they will. We're seeing the Equinox and other EV models. They're talking about bringing the Camaro back as an EV. So, we'll see where that goes.
Right.
All right, let's move on over to what's going on at Boeing. And Bill's got his Boeing hat on.
I got my Boeing hat basically because I my daughter took us out to a really nice lunch before taking us to the airport. And pardon me, you folks that live in the Seattle area, Mukilteo, I think it is. A beautiful spot. Well, to get there, you got to go right by the Boeing plant. I mean, you look over the chain link fence. There's rows and rows of Boeing's wrapped in I guess that's a green vinyl that they use to protect the surface of the aluminum and stuff. I mean, and of course, yesterday, I would like to congratulate the folks at Boeing and United Launch Alliance that they got the Starliner after a number, 3 attempts, I think. They got her up and she's in orbit, and they are, I think they dock sometime this afternoon with the space station. So, so that's great. I guess the crew up there, Butch and Suni, will be there for about a week, and then they'll come back, and hopefully all that goes well. But that's a very positive, because believe me, Boeing's been needing some positive press. But like I said, their airplane got my wife and I and a passenger, a loaded bunch of Alaska Airlines passengers, got us all safely, 3,000, 1,600 miles from Seattle nonstop back to Omaha. Got us here safely, so that I'm pleased with. So congratulations to Boeing.
Is the crew mostly whistleblowers? Is it mostly whistleblowers are using as their crew on that?
No. Let's not go there in this conversation. We'll talk about another issue that they're having. But apparently, just back on the Starliner, they've got a couple of more valves or something that have started leaking helium. That was what delayed the launch last week, and they got right down to within 4 minutes of the launch. And they had to scrub it because of some malfunction. So now they've discovered while the crew was resting before getting to the docking with the ISS, they discovered that they got some more leaks happening. So apparently none of that jeopardizes the safety of the crew or craft. So that's a good thing. something else for them to work on. So they obviously have a ways to go to replicate the success of Musk.
Yeah.
That Dragon space capital, that thing just apparently is as almost flawless as you can make something as a human being. So they got a ways to go, but that's a good thing. That's a positive thing, and they needed something to give them a little bit of a boost. So.
Well, this other article here, Boeing stealing trade secrets from an electric plane startup, is a little odd. So this company Zunum is awarded 81 million in damages, but that could go up. And apparently Zunum was a company that Boeing invested some money in, and they were trying to make a hybrid plane.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the plane would have had a range of 700 miles, carrying 9 passengers. It was going to be used as a regional jet that would be extremely fuel efficient, low emissions plane. But in 2019, the company ran out of money and collapsed.
Yeah.
And it doesn't give a real good explanation as to what Boeing stole.
They stole, yeah. I guess you probably have to read through the court transcripts and things like that to get that kind of detail. But that's in a way you can say, Boeing apparently, I think Boeing was the one that made the mock-up of this aircraft. And when they evaluated the mock-up, and believe me, I have a brother who spent 40 years in the commuter airline business. So I trust him with understanding the economics of what pays and what doesn't, and carrying 9 passengers 700 miles ain't going to pay for it. You've got to have aircraft like 737s and the Embraers and things like that carry at least 50 passengers.
Well, I guess it just depends on how cheap and how fuel efficient it was going to be. If you're really significantly able to reduce the operating cost, that makes a difference. Because I've flown. But
you have crews that get on those airplanes, right? So you've got 2 guys, fairly well high paid, although the commuters don't pay the guys anything near what the guys on the main lines fly. And then you got you have to have, by law, you have to have a certain number of attendants for not only just to serve you drinks and peanuts and things like that.
About that. So I used to fly on Seaport Air out of Kansas City. So I would drive down. It's about a little over a 2-hour drive to the Kansas City to the charter terminal at the Kansas City International Airport. Right. And I would fly on Seaport, and it would be a single engine Cessna. It would have 2 pilots, and it had seating for about 10. It was extremely comfortable, had big windows, but there was no attendant. So it would just
on FAA, how they're certified.
Right. And we would fly into Harrison, Arkansas, which is where FedEx Ground is headquartered. I forget what company it used to be that became FedEx Ground, but anyways, it's headquartered there in Harrison, Arkansas. And sometimes we pick up people and drop off people, but the flight would stop for 15 minutes, and you could get out and go to the restroom because there weren't restrooms on the plane. Right. And then it would just take off, and we'd be on our way. You could get snacks there if you wanted. Was this a charter
service or regular commuter service between KC and Harrison?
So it was a regular service, but I would take it from KC to Memphis. And so it would then go to the charter terminal. It would fly to the Memphis International Airport and then go over to the charter terminal.
It's operating under a different FAA certification, I'm sure.
It could be. But I asked them how many passengers they had to have to break even, and they said 0. So they were also, I think they were also hauling mail.
Because they had a mail contract,
but they were also subsidized to make it that these small airports. So there was a whole bunch of little airports they served throughout the region, but they were all little towns. They were all little towns like Harrison. I mean, smaller than, say, Topeka, as an example. It'd be smaller than those places.
Yeah, my brother started his airline career with Pioneer.
Okay.
And that's similar service that was basically subsidized by mail contracts and by programs to service Chadron and Grand Island and
You know,
McCook and places like that.
I'll tell you something funny. I used to have a tennis friend that he had his gotten a job as a pilot, and he was flying C-47s or DC-3s and running them around regional air places and delivering mail.
Mm-hmm.
And
That
I don't know if
that's
any of those are still out there flying, but I'm sure there's still some of those out there.
that's how the airlines got their start. Because if you'll remember, I happen to be well versed in this subject. That
Right.
the airlines up until the 1918 time frame, all of the mail in the United States was carried by trains. So if you
Yes.
were going to mail a letter from New York City to San Francisco, it would take you 4 days to do that. And that's
Mhm.
trains running night and day and so on, and but stopping along the way. So the postmaster at the time thought, well, we've got these newfangled flying machines. Why don't we put mail bags and we can charge for first class mail, air mail, and we can get the mail to the West Coast in half the time. And
Right.
eventually they hit that goal. But the government wanted to get out of the airmail business. So in 1924, they passed what's called the Kelly Act. And the Kelly Act then basically became the license for private contractors to carry mail at a certain rate and things that would make it economically financially available for them. And by the way, you could also carry passengers and subsidize that. So those early mail planes had a place for the cargo, but they also had a little cubby hole that they crammed 3 people into. That became the very first airline. So, for example, the first airline to come through Omaha was United Airline, which was actually a division originally of Boeing.
Hmm.
And so that's how, but they all got their start by carrying mail under contract, and that remains to this day. The 9 years I spent with a major air carrier here, that's where every day some revenue came from running down to the post office, grabbing the mail bags and putting them in the belly of the aircraft. And we got a little
Well,
money for that. So,
I'm sure for years there were a lot of cheap C-47s available, that probably
oh,
helped with
yeah,
that for a long time.
surplus, absolutely.
Let's see.
We're really getting
All
far
right.
off the track here, aren't we?
I know, I know. We really go off on tangents, don't we? All right. Let's see. So we need to start talking about these articles about, are electric cars really better for the environment
Yeah, yeah,
than
yeah.
fuel-powered cars? Now, I get this all the time. I see people like, oh, they're really just, the making the batteries, all this other is so destructive, and they're using child slave labor and all this other crap to make, the
Yeah,
EVs. And it's
all the
like, do you think
propagated
that's
by,
not happening in oil?
yeah, yeah,
If it's
yeah.
happening in EVs, it's happening 100 times worse in oil.
Yeah,
But
just go
that,
talk to the Nigerians.
right. It's the Congolese. It's the Congo that's the country that has all the problems with
Oh,
supposedly with the labor. It has all that to do specifically with cobalt.
well, no, I'm talking about the oil industry.
Oh yeah, the oil
You
industry. Yeah,
go talk to the people in Peru and Ecuador and the people in Nigeria and see what the oil industry and things have done to them. So yeah,
yeah. So anyways, they're the key stages where emissions are produced: the manufacturing of the car, production of the battery, running the cars over their life cycle, and disposal and recycling of the vehicle at the end of its life, including batteries. Now, it's interesting. This article really doesn't get heavy into the discussion on hybrids or plug-in hybrids, but they
no,
do
strictly
mention
BEV. Yeah, yeah,
that the plug-in hybrids, because people are so bad about plugging the damn thing in,
right. It
that
might as
they
well just a
really,
gas vehicle. Yeah,
yeah, might as well just be a gas vehicle, which I'm kind of a proponent of plug-in hybrids, because that it's not really free, but you know what I mean, that those 50 miles each day, you're basically just driving an
yeah.
EV.
Most of the time you can drive. That's what the early people that were doing this were that got the original Volts. Um, that was their comment. Says, my gas is spoiling because I'm not using the gasoline engine.
Or that Cadillac ELR.
Yep.
I still look at those.
Have you bought one yet?
No, but it is tempting, man.
Yeah,
it's such a nice looking car for
it is.
For about $10,000 after the rebate. Anyways, so here we are with manufacturing costs or manufacturing emissions to make the car's metal body. Now, this is metric tons of CO2. So petrol uses a little more because there's more components than there are in an electric car. Now, then we're going to go add the batteries. Well, the batteries take almost as much emissions as the car itself. Okay, so right here, EVs are worse. And this is what people always want to quote is this here. We're going to keep on going. We're going to put the cars on the road now. Now, we're going to add emissions. Now, these are Australian numbers.
These are Australian numbers.
And we're going to, but it's going to show that over the average lifetime, and they're estimating that a car runs about the equivalent of about 100,000 miles US.
I think they do 15 years is what this is based on, and I think it's 189,000 kilometers.
Which would be about 120,000 miles.
Right, yep.
Now, my experience is, and I'm one of these people that runs a car till it falls apart, okay? Or somebody hits me and totals my car out. And I've had that happen a few times, and
like
it always seems to
a late shift, the hospital.
I've really been around some bad drivers when I used to live in Memphis. Okay, Omaha, not so much. Okay, and it'll happen eventually. Somebody's going to hit me here in Omaha, but it just hasn't happened. Okay, and I've been here for 10 years, and it's been quite pleasing not to be getting battered by other drivers.
Yeah,
but that being said. Now, this 10.5 tons of CO2 that the EV emits is based on the fact that in Australia, 68% of their electricity came from fossil fuels. Now, in the United States, it's only 60%. Okay, but it really depends on where you're at. Okay, because the United States, 40% comes from renewables and nuclear.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look at Tasmania.
Yeah, we'll get there in a minute. We'll get there in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, but anyways, so this was the average for all of Australia, but this is factoring that 68% of the total Australian electricity came from fossil fuels. Because I've had people make the argument that it takes a pound of coal to put a kilowatt hour in a car battery, and that's true. That is true if you're getting your energy from coal. Okay,
does not all come from coal.
Yes, it doesn't all come from coal. So here we're showing where this crossover is. And this was based on driving about 12,000 kilometers a year, which is only about 7,000 or 8,000 or maybe 8,000 miles. It's not really a lot of miles compared to how people drive in the United States. Okay, but they were showing that the crossover point is around 38,000 kilometers, which is about 25,000 miles is where that converts as to where the electric car then has a lower emissions. And once again, this is using 68% of the fuel in that EV coming from
the Australian power grid mix.
Yeah, the Australian power grid mix. Yeah. So now we're going to come down here. What is this one here? So this is as the grid becomes cleaner, it starts separating more and more. We're going to keep going. All right. Now, this is an electric car in Western Australia where they have a higher use of fossil fuels to fill up the car. Okay, so it's not as great there, but the crossover point was right at 40,000 versus 38,000. Okay, but now
that's kilometers, everybody.
Yes, that was in kilometers. Now we're going to go to Tasmania, famous for the Tasmanian devil. Okay, famous for the Tasmanian devil. We all know the Tasmanian devil from Looney Tunes shows.
Right.
Okay, anyways, Tasmania is mostly renewables.
Yep.
And so they don't have the same situation. The crossover point was at 23,000 kilometers, which is roughly 15,000 miles.
Yeah.
So at 15,000 miles, the EV pays its carbon debt. Okay. Yep. And it pretty much no longer was using it. So if you had solar here in the United States, it would accomplish the same thing.
That, yeah.
Okay. So with solar, with solar or wind, you're at about a 15,000 mile deficit. And here it talks about what about cars charged on rooftop solar? Well, they're showing the same thing, same 23,000 figure.
The guys that wrote this really did an excellent job. That's why I made it my top editor.
Oh yeah, no, this is really good. So now we're going to get rid of our cars, and we're going to talk about what goes on at the end. Well, here more of an EV is recyclable. So you're removing 1.6 tons on the petrol car, but you're removing 2.5. And part of this is because the battery is such a big part of the process, and it's going to be repurposed and then eventually recycled, which the gas car may sell some of its parts, but it's not the same situation. So the electric cars actually have a bigger deficit. And everybody wants to say, oh, these EVs are going to be filling landfills. It's like, well, not as much as gas cars are.
Ooh.
Because there's going to be less.
How many catalytic converters do you see in a landfill with all that platinum in there? Think of that in terms of the battery and all the valuable minerals and materials that are in that battery. Now, somebody's going to figure out how to make money out of that.
I get requests all the time asking if I know where people can get used EV batteries that they can recycle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because there's big business in that, and there's lots of places set up for it. There's no shortage of that because they're all chomping at the bit, waiting for there to be demand. Mm-hmm. Tesla takes all of theirs, ones that when they get a warranty swap out, they take them all and they put them in their own battery storage facilities. Actually, they use most of them in their own manufacturing facilities to help as grid storage. So those things are getting repurposed, and as grid storage, they'll last another 20 or 30 years. So it's going to be a long time before a lot of those batteries ever get
nowhere near as difficult an environment for them in that situation.
Okay. Now, this chart shows the full life. Over here is petrol, and these are comparing the different parts of Australia. Here was New South Wales, and so it's considerably lower, but this was Tasmania here. Tasmania was
right there,
by far the cheapest. So that was interesting. Now, they don't do a chart for hybrids, but their comment was plug-in hybrids can be run off petrol or a battery that's plugged in, but the life cycle depends on the region where it's charged and how diligent the driver is in charging. It can also run on petrol. The European Union found that emissions from plug-in hybrids were 3.5 times higher than reported, and it concluded that the hybrids are charged and driven in electric mode much less than how they were expected to be used. And it's not so much that they're being driven that much more, just people aren't getting around to charging them.
Right.
Whereas if you had an EV only, you'd be forced to charge it.
You would be forced, yeah.
Yeah. So we have another article kind of on the same topic, but it's about the United States. I'm going to cover just a little bit of this. We'll go through as quick as we can. But EVs are cleaner and have brighter futures than traditional cars. Let's see what we get here.
This is the same conclusions as the Aussies did,
Yeah, probably not as fact-filled as the other one.
Oh, no, that Australian one is brilliant. It really is.
Now, they're saying here an average car in the United States is driven 155,000 miles, and it would be 27 to 71% less carbon than those of an equivalent car with an internal combustion engine. And they're saying in the United States, the break-even point is currently at 25,500 miles, about 2 years into ownership. Oh, in China, that number is 73,300 miles.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm curious why China would be so different.
Probably the amount of coal that they're still burning over there. I mean, they're making a great push to to go with renewables, but they use whopping load of coal.
They were having to take that Three Gorges Dam. They were having to take a lot of that hydroelectric power offline.
Off there because they're having issues with the design of the dam. Yeah. Should that thing break? Oh my God, that's gonna.
Oh, it would kill millions.
Yeah, it would be bad. Yeah.
Yeah, so they had to take part of it offline. Now, this other article I've got. So this article, it's a little extreme. It says Chinese giant BYD butchers popular EV now left to rot in Aussie
Oh
graveyard.
yeah, I read that and I read that. What are they talking about? So
Yeah,
I basically what I did is I just rewrote the headline so it would make sense. Basically, BYD is clobbering Tesla. Tesla is not selling its cars very well in Australia, whereas BYD with their $15,000 cars are are cleaning up. So
yeah, that's tough. So this article is talking about several EV manufacturers slashed their prices by as much as $20,000 due to
mm,
BYD. And this is, we keep talking about this, like, well, where it's hurting the United States, is it hurting I'm going to start calling them the big four US automakers, but it's
yeah,
hurting Tesla. It's especially though hurting GM, Ford, and Stellantis and their
yeah,
EV sales in their countries, because the Chinese EVs are better, and they're supposed, people that have tested them, they're saying they're better quality, they got nicer finishes, and they're cheaper, and it's really hard to compete with all of that.
oh,
And
yeah,
so people can say what they want to say to try to say that Chinese products are junk, but the consumers do not agree.
yeah. Well, Neo can't keep up with demand, and Neo, which came out with that basically Porsche look-alike,
Hmm.
um, they said they're in the process of building a third factory to keep up with demand because their two factories now can't keep up with it. So
Right. Let's see. So Tesla used to be the name on everyone's lips when it came to EVs, but BYD has emerged as a fierce competitor. They sold 1,900 electric cars in Australia last month, well above its previous record of 1,600. And Tesla saw a two-thirds reduction in April sales.
yeah,
Wow, that's a
yeah,
big
they've
drop.
got a lot of cars. That the headline, they're about what was that? Refresh my the something about the graveyard. That
Yeah,
comes out of an earlier article out of the Sun newspaper, one of Rupert Murdoch's newspapers down in Australia, referring to the holding yard where the ships, come in with the imported cars, and I think it's in Melbourne. And there's a holding yard there, and the cars aren't moving anywhere nearly as quickly as they used to out of that holding yard. And of course, Rupert and his staff refer to it as a graveyard. Well, no, it's
yeah.
not a
Well, I think it
graveyard.
has over 2,000 Teslas sitting there
There's a
that
bunch
haven't been
there. Yeah,
sold yet.
there's a bunch there, and that's a problem. But
It
to
sure
refer to
is.
it as a graveyard, yeah, it's a
Well, they're
holding
not going to
yard.
sit there. They're going to sell eventually.
They'll sell them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll just slow down the ones that are coming in. The newer models. So
So Peugeot has taken a $20,000 price cut. Let's see. Te the Tesla Model Ys in Australia have dropped from 72,000 to 55. And let's see.
and that's
But
Australian dollars, I would assume. So
yeah, which aren't a lot different than our dollars,
no, they're pretty
but they
close.
are a
Yeah,
little cheaper, but it's not a big difference. Um, Let me see. So BYD keeps introducing new products. This is one of the arguments I've seen about Tesla. Tesla is not really introducing any new products in a
yeah,
while, and but BYD is continuing to enter popular markets with a plug-in EV Ute. A Ute is a fancy Australian word for truck, pickup truck,
right.
called the Shark, launching later this year. And let me see, BYD got close to its all-time sales record last month with 331,000 vehicles sold. I had people a couple months ago telling me about how BYD sales were crashing, you know, because they had that 1 month during the Chinese New Year. Anyways, is the EV honeymoon over? EVs have enjoyed an almost doubling of sales year over year since 2020, but the number of cars going off the lot dipped 5% in April. And the sector is struggling to advance beyond the early adopter phase. This is what they're trying to say from this article. But it's tough to really see that. It's so Peugeot had a car drop from 51,000 to right at 40,000. Oh no, it was Leaf. The Leaf went from 51,000 to 40,000. The
Yeah,
Peugeot
yeah.
E2008 dropped from 40,000 to 40,000 from 60,000. So that's quite a bit, quite a bit of a big drop there. And I saw that other article you're talking about, the EV, the Tesla EV graveyard in Australia, but it's like
Yeah.
there's just a lot of them available to ship out to customers. Tesla will probably do some type of incentive. They're right now in the United States, they're doing a 0.99% deal. So they're trying to get folks in there and buying those cars.
Well,
Anyways,
it's working in Seattle. I can confirm that.
yeah.
it,
Was
it
there
is
anything else from
amazing.
Seattle you wanted to talk about today?
Oh, let's see. What was out probably, but not off the top of my head at the moment. So,
Okay. Yeah, you had something about, oh, the data reveals overwhelming dominance Tesla holds in the US
well,
electric car
yeah,
market.
that's the point. Was that that's verified by my experience in in Seattle. It's just okay. Gray is popular, white is popular, blue is less so. I mean, the thing about Teslas though is that you can spot. They've only got 4 models, but
Hmm.
you can spot. I mean, the let's say I can't pronounce the von Holsten or whatever his name is, the designer, in perpetuating the design of the car. You can spot a Tesla half a mile away, barreling at you at 60 miles an hour on the interstate and the opposite lane. They are
Yes.
such a distinctive car. Can you say that about any of the other makes? Well, yeah, it's a BMW because it's got the oval, thing, but that's about
That's
it.
tough.
So in terms of branding, that they have done a wonderful job branding that car, because it doesn't matter if it's a Model Y, if it's a Model X, if it's a Model 3, whatever, right? Model S
Yeah,
is not
you
so
can't
much,
always
but
tell which Tesla it is from a distance.
no, you
But
can't.
you
But
can
you
always
can
just tell that it is
tell
a
it's
Tesla.
a Tesla. Yep, and
Yeah.
that's a pardon my French. That's a hell of a statement. They have
Yeah.
done a
The
brilliant
weird thing
job
about that
with
is you get a lot of people though that complain that they don't like the way the Teslas look. And so
that. Well, again, eye of the beholder.
right. No, I get it. I don't see what the issue is with it, but
My
they
my my
definitely.
my problem is, do I want the new Model Y or the new Model 3, or do I want the new Model Y? And at the moment, I'm leaning to the new Model Y with the fancy wheels and the whatever they call that ghost gray, whatever it is. Boy, and after that, my second choice is the white with the black handles. Those are really sharp cars. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyways, well, Bill, I'm glad to have you back today. Folks, we
Thank you. It's
appreciate
good to
all of
be
you
back.
watching, and we will be back next week. I'm not sure if we'll do the Friday show tomorrow yet or not. So
Okay.
if not, we'll be back on Tuesday.
All right.
And
Thanks,
everybody, have a
everybody, for
great day.
tuning in and listening to us carry on.